director of DOC NYC. Welcome. We're so happy you could be with us today. This is day 2 of our festival. We run 8 days long. We have more than 250 films and events, more than 300 special guests. So I encourage all of you to grab one of these catalogs on your way out and come join us again. So before we get started, a couple of important thank yous. Here we go. Thank you to our leadership sponsor, HBO Documentary Films, our major sponsors, Amazon Studios, A&E Indie Films, History Films and Netflix, our supporting sponsors, Image Nation Abu Dhabi, Showtime Documentary Films, and Sony, our leading media sponsors, Vulture and WNET. Tremendous thank you to all of the tireless volunteers and staff who make this festival happen, like that man right there, and these guys right here, so give it up for them. So this morning's film camera person, it plays in a very special section of our festival called the shortlist section. And what we do is we kind of look back at the year of films and say which 15 really stuck out for us and which ones are kind of our favorites. And a lot of these films have shown on the big screen before, and some of them are streaming online, but that doesn't matter. We're here together to watch it on a big screen as ideally it should be seen. And what makes these very special is that we have the filmmakers with us to join for a Q&A after the film. So it is my pleasure to welcome the filmmaker Kristian Johnson to say a few words.
I think all of you who are coming to this festival are aware of what Rafaela and Tom have done in creating this incredible festival. And early this year in the life of camera person, Tom was one of the first people who saw the film at a moment when we didn't know whether it would resonate with anyone. And when it resonated with him, we were like, okay, we hope other people will like it too. But I just want to say, the making of this film has been such an incredibly strange process. And what it has always been for me and continues to be, including today, is a very alive process. And because in many ways what I was encountering was sort of my relationship to past, present, and future in looking at this footage. And one of the things that being a camera person requires is this incredible sort of intensity in the present. And going back into this footage put me into a place of realizing these different moments in history that I was in when I was filming things. So I want to acknowledge among all of us today that we are in a new moment in history than we quite expected ourselves to be in. And the fact of sort of being 2 days out from the election has changed all of us, has changed the way we will see this film, has changed what this film is. So I always think of filmmaking as a relationship. It's a series of relationships that goes forward into the future. One thing that I want to ask you is to sit with the credits, because what this film is for me is an acknowledgement of the many people, including the audiences, that make films together. So the credits are like really long and juicy and full of stories. And so just be with them, and then I will see you afterwards. Thanks.
That little seed kind of inside of you saying, now I have to kind of take all of this and make it into my own. And how did you know it was time?
I didn't know. The seed, I would say, I didn't recognize was a seed, but I experienced as a failure and a defeat, which may be a familiar feeling to everyone right now. But basically, I had worked on a film over the course of 3 years, and one of the protagonists of the film, a young woman in Afghanistan, who had agreed to be in the film, who knew I was filming her, who wanted to be in a movie, when I showed her the almost finished film, she said, "I'm sorry, I am now too afraid to be in your film." So that film had to completely collapse, and with it, I sort of collapsed. Because we had been so together on the journey that I didn't, I would really beat myself up about not seeing it coming, that she would change the way that she did. But I think now, retrospectively, it was impossible for me to see that. But it made me think about and question all these times in the past when promises had been made to people that couldn't necessarily be made. You know, promises. We can't actually make promises when we don't know what the future will be. So I started rethinking how to rebuild that film, and in the course of doing that, I realized I needed to work with a producer. because I had been doing it all by myself with an editor. I just went to Afghanistan, shot by myself, came back, worked with an editor, and then when that film fell apart and I started asking the questions I was asking, I really realized I needed to work with someone, and I got lucky to be working with the most wonderful producer ever.
Actually, Marilyn, hey, we talked about, and Marilyn, I know you've been behind a lot of these films, and you've collaborated probably with Kristian as a cinematographer in certain projects. And what was the experience like for you working right now as Kristian, not obviously as cinematographer, but also as the director of the film, and also, you know, not a film about other people's stories. I mean, in a sense, it's your story through other people's stories. So, what was that like?
The amazing thing is, despite the fact that Kristian shot on a number of films before I started producing on this film, we had not worked together on a film at the same time.
Oh.
So she had been on 1971 before I came on as producer, and then most of the shooting had been done at that point. So, so I actually, and then we had a lot of mutual overlaps, but I knew of Kristian, but I think for me, what was clear and what's in her work as a cinematographer and what's been in her work as a director is, you know, the tremendous humanity that is Kristian Johnson and the way in which she embraces the world on a very personal relationship by relationship level. And you could see that was the thread that was being carried forward from one part of her work to another part. And then I think what makes the film at all even remotely possible is that that's how she engages with the world. So I was lucky. It's been one of the best professional collaborations I've had the pleasure of being a part of, and I've been a part of really good ones, so that says something.
Let's take some questions from the audience, right here.
And it's because you alluded to the election in your introduction, and I was thinking about it the entire time. Last night I was at an event for filmmakers at Union Docs that was basically kind of like an emergency, all hands on deck, what does it mean to be a filmmaker after the election? And I kept thinking about this during the film, and I think one of the things that kept coming to my mind is that there seemed to be a tension in the film between a kind of impotence on the part of the filmmaker and at the same time an incredible power that filmmakers often wield, especially in situations where they're documenting people who are more vulnerable than they are. And I find myself asking, I'm really kind of at a loss to ask, what is the role of the filmmaker in this world right now? So I don't have, I guess I just wanted to talk about that.
Beautifully expressed, and I think that these two poles that you speak of impotence and power, you know, which are literally the opposites, right? Impotence is lack of power, and power is just power. You know, one of the things that I did when I was making the press notes for this film, I wrote a list of what the camera enables, and it's actually quite a long list, and it doesn't sit in one place. Some of it is all the way at the edge at an abuse of power, and some part of it is all the way at an edge of like testifying to things that have been unspoken and unseen and unrespected. And then in that spectrum, it does many things, and it shifts all of the time. So I do think that one of the things that I came to recognize in the making of this film is that our shifting selves, the shifting history that we are in the middle of, we must keep contending with that. So it's not as if this divide and moment in history has not happened. It has. It is shifting all of us, and it will shift the way we use cameras or the way we think about film. We do not yet know. You know, one part of being a human, which is like the wonderful, like one of the upsides of aging, is that you are shocked into like being surprised how you can keep being surprised. You think you know it, you keep thinking you know it all, and you keep being so wrong, right? I'm looking at a wonderful woman who is the mother of one of my best friends from college, who I haven't seen in, I don't know, like 35 years, right? She's like, don't name numbers. But like, I loved her daughter, you know, whatever, 35 years ago. She saw me as a person 35 years ago. She is here, and that connection across time and space, it's just real. And so, you know, we don't know. Sitting with the not knowing of this moment and treasuring what are the things that we value you know, when I started making this film, I think I was overwhelmed with feelings of impotence. Because I've been working for 25 years on all these films that are supposed to be making impact and change and address poverty and address racism. And like, what's changing? So I felt really impotent when I started making this film. And one of the big gifts for me was this moment that Marilyn shared with me where Nels had put the footage together in a way that allowed me to see myself in the world, not just with this sort of unkindness and the feelings of failure, but also with this recognition that there were some real connections. There are connections that endure over 35 years, even if you don't see a person for 35 years. She walks into the room and I love her. Well, one thing that was really powerful for me was the moment that you see in the film where I'm with the Bosnian family and the woman says to me, you know, you're making this so your children will see who you were. And honestly, that was the first time I thought of the film existing in the future. I thought the film was me dealing with the past exclusively. And it was sort of in that moment that I was like, oh, this goes in a different direction, which I think is part of what this journey for me has been, because being a camera person, you have to stay like very acutely in the present. And that's the demand of the work, is to be really in the present, to forget your own life, right? Because you're just like, you're thinking about all these other things. So this film sort of gave me a chance to open back up into the past, and it's also given me a way to open up into the future, which now includes my children. So, you know, I think differently about what happened 2 days ago because I have children, no question. And this film has all sorts of evidence of different phases in my life as a woman, which I think is really interesting. I also, you know, I'm really interested in opening up this dialogue of like, how do we do the work that we do, period, as parents, period, or as people who don't have children but care about future generations? Like, how does that impact our thinking? And one of the things I notice is when I work with young women, trying to work with people about how to enter this world of documentary, young women always ask me what you just asked me. And they start asking it at basically like age 20. How am I going to do this work and be a parent? And very few, I've had a couple young men have asked me, how can I do my work and be a parent? So I'm like, I throw it out to all of us. How do we do the work we want to do and be parents? You know, or not, or choose not to, or we can't and we envision another way. So I left that open-ended because it is open-ended in the world right now. In that very same maternity ward, that woman had to go back to work. She had already delivered how many babies that day? There was not a doctor there to do C-sections. There was not a working oxygen machine. There was no blood bank. And she was just going back to work. And it's really interesting to us, like some people see this scene and they're like, why doesn't she walk faster? Think about why she's not walking faster, people, right? Like, so you know, and she has stayed in my mind for years, this woman, her blurry face in my mind, I blurred it because it was almost too painful to think about. And going back into this footage has been really powerful for me. And so we left it open-ended so that you would think about the babies that are being born right now without the resources that they need.
That's where the power of this work is in the witnessing.
Yeah.
It's not so much like the social, you know, we're all supposed to change the world as filmmakers.
Yeah.
It's the witnessing and how that witnessing can connect to me across time and space.
Yeah.
Because I had 2 babies that were in incubators. They got the most high-tech care.
Right, and it connects to you because you went through that experience in one particular way. It connects to other people differently. And I think for me it speaks to cinema because part of why I kept filming was that when you film, you believe there will be happy endings. So I didn't stop filming because I kept thinking somehow the fact that I was filming would mean, and I know we have to wrap it up, but I will just say briefly around unintended consequences. So one of the things that we learned after the fact, many years after the fact, was that that hospital kept trying to treat that baby. I've been saying in Q&As that it was for 12 hours that I kept filming that baby. I was recently with the director, it was 30 hours that I continued after the moment that you see in the film to follow the struggle with the baby. what we learned was that the hospital was pulling off resources and doctors that they needed in other places in the hospital because I was filming, not because they could save the baby. So you could say, boom, those are the unintended consequences of like damage that we did by being there. Then the next thing that we learn is that the father of the baby, who accompanied me through this whole thing, a beautiful man named Muhammad, who was rooting like I was rooting for his baby to survive, he lives in an area of northern Nigeria that is now very controlled by Boko Haram extremists. He holds a very moderate line. He's become an imam, and this is what I have heard. I want to go to Nigeria and verify it. But apparently what he says about why he is a moderate person is that there were a couple of women who stayed with him while his baby was struggling to survive. And so that is also one of the unintended consequences of filming so long, was that we were with him through that process, and he recognizes the love with which we were with him.